Howdy neighbor, how is your garden growing? Today in my garden, we are going to be talking about the must-do summer plan in order to beat the heat and have a successful Florida vegetable garden. So join me today as I give you the tips and all the ideas to be thinking about in order to make this your best Florida vegetable garden yet. Now this is going to potentially be a little bit different than what we've done in the past for summer vegetable gardening, because a lot of that was focused on hot weather crops that we could be putting in so that we could continue to maximize our harvest. But honestly, this year, what I'm recommending is actually giving yourself a little bit of a break, but not too much. Because here in Florida, our summer is winter. I mean, like basically, when you think about the classic vegetable garden season in Florida, we're talking about fall, winter, and spring. And honestly, the hot weather crops are kind of a thing we do to fill in. But you may be like me and you need a bit of a break. The constant caring for plants, the constant harvesting and canning and prepping, and so much stuff to do with all these harvests. But you may be like me and you need a little bit of a break, and so does your garden. One of the opportunity areas for us Florida gardeners is actually to give ourselves a little bit of a break here in the summertime, because the weather is super intense. We have high heat, high sun, high humidity, tons of bugs, and throw in lots of rainstorms. Taking it down a notch at this time of year might be the right thing. So one of the things we can do for summer is we could continue on our harvest with hot weather crops like sweet potatoes and okras and roselles, and that is totally an option. But if your priority when it comes to crops in your Florida vegetable garden are more of the classics, I'm talking about your lettuces, your tomatoes, your peppers, your pumpkins. That's really all about fall through spring. And so what we should be using our summertime for is really preparing, just like the northerners do during the winter time. And since fall is our prime time season, some of these activities that I'm going to be outlining for you are what we should be thinking about doing now in the middle of the summer so we can have a really good start to our classic vegetable garden season. And the first area we need to talk about is infrastructure. I'm talking trellises, I'm talking raised garden beds, I'm talking in garden beds, I'm talking container gardening, all the things that hold your vegetables, your soil, your water. It holds all the things together. Above the ground or in the ground, it doesn't matter which one it is. So some of the questions you want to ask yourself is, how much space did you need this last garden season? Or if you're new, how much do you need? Do you need to do some 4x8 beds, 4 feet by 8 feet? Or do you need to add some additional rows for those who already have a garden space? Do we need to add something that gets the veggies up off the ground? So what I would be considering right now is, do you need to add any raised garden beds? It's something I needed to do in this vegetable garden this last season, is I had in-ground beds, but with the slope of my yard, everything started to get a little bit too out of control during the summertime. So I opted to move into these raised garden beds so that it kind of had a neater, tidier look. That's something you're looking for in your garden. Check out this video, or maybe it's over here, this video to learn more about these type of raised garden beds. A reason that you might want to go with something like a raised garden bed as well, during the beginning of the classic vegetable garden season, we're still getting those monsoon rains, and getting the plants up out of the ground a bit actually can help with not having them totally drown in their beds. I also find that raised garden beds can be beneficial with helping keep the critters out. Many of them are very small, so it makes a little bit more effort. It's easier to cover those and kind of contain them. So it might be something that you want to think about. The other thing is that if you're a beginner and you don't want to do in-ground beds or raised garden beds, is consider starting with containers, right? Containers can be super beneficial and for figuring out the right spot in your garden. Because if you put it in one spot and you think it's the perfect amount of sun and the perfect everything, and then 3 months from now when the sun shifts, you don't feel like it's getting the right level of sun, it's easier to drag a container than move a whole garden bed. So whether you're gonna get containers or if you need to go get raised garden beds, you should be considering ordering them now. And this gives you a couple weeks to go ahead and do some research, potentially order something, have it get shipped to you, and then give you time to build it before we hit late July or August. Just to give you some timing, because you're going to want to avoid the hottest, most intense sun times a day, and we have limited windows of that in the summertime. So if we're going to wait till the very end of the day, being able to plan out like 30 minutes, hour for setting up a bed would be a good estimate. Now, if you went with the containers, just like getting a 5-gallon pot a lot faster, you could probably set that up in about, like 5 to 10 minutes. Now, the other thing you might want to be considering adding to your garden are things like trellises. Whether you're going to do a DIY cattle panel trellis or you want to get one of the fancier trellises, there's a lot of options out there. But this is a great way to improve how efficient your space is when it comes to your vining plants. Whether you're thinking tomatoes or pumpkins or beans, a lot of times getting these up and off the ground, which is really great for here in Florida because we're really notorious for all these mold issues. And when you get these vining plants up and off the ground, they're just a lot happier. If you're interested in learning more about like a DIY cattle panel trellis, check out this video here. Now, if you're saying to yourself, but Jacqueline, I already have raised garden beds, or I already have the pots and containers that I need, or I already have my trellis, one of the things you should be considering doing is checking out all of your beds, containers, or trellises to see if there's any repairs that need to be done. Was anything damaged in this last season? Is anything falling apart? My people who have wood beds, this might be a time where we need to replace some panels. Did anything get cracked? Also, you want to have your general infrastructure in good state before we're in the middle of the season. You don't want to have a bed falling apart and like you're trying to grow your lettuces. So take the time right now to look at all your raised garden beds, check all your pots. I found one of my self-watering pots had a hole in the base of it, so it wasn't retaining any of the water, which explained why I lost a lot of strawberries in that pot very quickly. So doing these really quick inspections can just help save you a lot of headache down the road after you've invested a lot of time into getting your crops going. Now, for my newer gardeners who are really excited about the idea of doing something like a raised garden bed or a trellis and are kind of a little worried about doing all that project work in the summertime, I'm with you on this. What you might want to consider is preparing to start in 5 gallons or grow bags right now. So getting all the materials for that, and then order your supplies so that you can do these bigger projects November, December, once it starts to cool down. There's a pretty good break point right around that time period for you to flip between crops, and you won't really have lost too much time with some of your warm weather crops, which could also be transplanted later on once we get past January. So it's kind of a win-win situation, but get yourself in a good place so that you have the right base to start with. Now, speaking of the base, we've got something to hold this stuff, but we really need to talk about the soil, because a lot has happened with your soil if you've been growing it. For all of those who have existing infrastructure, at this point, a lot of your soil has depleted a lot of the nutrition. So now is the time to consider, how are we going to refresh that through the summertime? Now, some of you have been fertilizing all the way, doing amendments all the way, and might not need to do much. But for those who kind of just do a once and done or a couple times and done, I would be considering a few different options. One is considering doing cover crops at this time of year. While you might not be as worried about growing something to harvest, what you don't want to do is leave these beds totally bare. Ripping all your plants out is going to leave you in a spot where you'll deplete more of your soil, which kind of feels backwards. And the reason is because when we hit the monsoon rains of the summertime, all of that water, if nothing's holding onto the organic matter in the soil, it's just going to flush everything through. And you will see a really dramatic drop in your soil in the summertime. Plus, it won't be like, it'll start turning really sandy at the same time. So it's like a lose-lose across the board. So get something in there. So first off, if you still have crops in your bed, even if they're like looking really sad right now and you're ready to remove them, just cut them at the base. Do not rip the entire root system out. That way you still have roots in the ground holding on to stuff. The second thing to do is to go ahead and add a cover crop. It could be something really basic like a sun hemp, or you can just throw like sweet potatoes in there and just get the vines going. That alone will help hold on to organic matter. You can also use other plants like sun hemp and sorghum. There's like a whole bunch of them out there for cover cropping. I'm going to be doing a very basic one like sun hemp. Another thing to be considering doing at this time of year is chop and dropping. Because we're going to have so much rain, if you mow your lawn, your grass is going to be growing at like a breakneck speed. So taking all your grass clippings and just dumping in your bed are going to add so much nitrogen, just so much nitrogen back into the soil. Another thing that you can consider doing at this time of year, another thing you should consider doing, and this is one of the things that I'm going to be doing once I go ahead and clear these crops out, is I'm going to be doing compost in place. So I will be digging trenches into these beds, taking the compost that would normally go to my compost bin, and it's going to go straight into that soil. So instead of building compost somewhere else and then moving it into these beds, I am just going to move it directly. Now, oftentimes people get really worried about this because of how slow stuff breaks down, and that can cause problems for your future crops. But In the summertime in Florida, stuff breaks down so fast. I mean, even wood chips start breaking down within 3 months, and that's wood chips, let alone you're talking about food scraps like fruits and veggies. So another thing you might want to do is compost in place. Now you might be thinking, oh, I'm going to go get a bunch of compost to throw on top. You do want to get prepared to do that, but I would not be doing it early in the summer. I would be waiting much closer to when we actually have crops, because if you just dump a lot of fresh compost onto these beds and then let them sit for a couple of months, you're gonna feed a lot of weeds. You'll also lose a lot of organic matter at the same time. So hold on to ordering compost and fresh soil till the end of summer to top off your beds. So we've talked infrastructure, we've talked soil, let's talk water. Now you might be thinking, Jacqueline, it's summer, there's so much water. There's too much water. And I agree. But one of the things with the classic vegetable garden season is the majority of it is during drought season. Yes, the beginning of our classic season is in fall when we're still getting monsoon rains, but most of it is actually drought season. And at the tail end, you're really in drought season. Like this last year, the plants, they were not happy. So one of the things to be checking or adding is irrigation to your beds. If you don't have irrigation, this may be the time to go ahead and add it. I know it's really hot out. Running a water line out and doing drip irrigation in beds, or using existing sprinkler heads and just making sure they spray, or paying someone to maybe move a head so they just get into your beds. What you want to do is you really want to make it as automated as possible for yourself, because the other thing besides drought season that is the majority of the classic vegetable garden season, and the thing that's like in the middle of it that really throws people off, is all the holidays. You have all the holidays happening, and what really happens during that time is people get distracted, and that's okay to be distracted. Go enjoy the holidays, enjoy family, go travel, but you don't want all your hard work to just suddenly like die on you because nothing's getting any water. And a watch out is this last year we had like a super wet November, December, January. So you might have gotten away with not having a watering system, but if you don't have it this coming year, you're probably gonna have a lot more trouble. So consider adding some sort of automatic irrigation system. Now, if you're like, hey, I already have irrigation in my garden, one of the things you want to check on, even me, I do this multiple times a year, is to run your irrigation system, whatever you use to water your beds, and make sure you have proper water pressure. It's not unusual for sprinkler heads and drip hoses to get clogged. We have so much stuff in our water here in Florida, and then once you put the little teeny tiny holes and the little sprayers out here in the wild, you know, it's just a little tiny bit of sand and the whole thing gets gunked up. Especially once we're getting closer to the classic vegetable garden season. I would say do this in July. It'll just make sure that the things that you do have in place are actually working. You'll want to check that your watering cans are all okay, there's no cracks, or maybe you need to buy a new one. You'll also want to check your hoses around your property, your spigots, make sure that all of those are ready to go so that you don't have to do like me and drag a hose across the yard even though you have a spigot over there. It's just not working. We have our infrastructure. We've either bought something, we've ordered something, or we have something and it's in good repair. We have gotten our soil. We're either amending it slowly or we're prepared to order soil to top it off for the end of the season. We've checked our watering system so it's automatic and we can do anything by hand, no problem. The next section, we need to talk about what are you gonna grow it in? Now we've talked about beds and that's kind of when they're the big plants, but I'm talking about when they're like little baby plants. Honestly, I think it's gonna follow the same model. So let's talk infrastructure first. What are you gonna be growing your seeds in? Are you gonna be seeding them right in place, or like many of us, you're gonna start them in seed trays? So let's think about, do you have seed trays? And if you do, are they in good repair? And I know for me, I have to go and buy some new seed trays because mine were just a bunch of stuff like I bought flowers in like 10 years ago and they are finally just disintegrated. So I'm gonna be investing in some new 6-cell seed trays so that, you know, they can last the time and I can get my seeds really good and started in more cover space than the wilds of my backyard. So consider either investing in some seed trays, or if you have seed trays, just doing an inspection, make sure that they're still in good condition. Then let's talk about soil. Do you have your seed starting mix? Whether you're going to just buy like a standard Miracle-Gro seed starting mix from one of the big box stores, or are you gonna create your own? You need to make sure that you have the ingredients for that. So either go buy new, or go and make sure that you have the right amount of inventory so that you are ready and set to go. Then of course, let's talk water for your little baby seeds. Now, if you're starting them in seed trays, you'll want to get one of those, like, you know, I don't know what you want to call it. It's the tray for the seed trays that holds the water. Because the problem with starting your little seeds is that those little bits of seeds and little bits of soil dry out really, really fast. So if you don't want to be watering 300 times a day, we want to get like a watering tray. Is that what we would call it? You know, you set the little like seed trays in the tray with the water in it. So if you have one of those, make sure it's in good repair. If you don't have one of those, like I didn't, buy one. That's kind of the long-term watering. If you want to add water on top, this goes back again to our watering cans. If you do have a watering can, you do want to make sure you have one that has like the gentle rain spigot on it. Same thing with if you're going to use your hoses, you want to make sure that you have something that can give more of a misting rain shower versus like a full-on 300 psi smash those things to death. So make sure that your hoses or your watering cans, or you get one of those little spritzer bottles, so you have one of those ready to go so that you can water your baby seedlings so that they can survive and thrive this time of year. The other thing to think about, and this is one of the ones I need to go back through, is hand tools. Whether you need to buy new or you need to repair, clean, or replace, we should be doing this time of year, because once those seedlings are grown come late, because if you're starting late July, we're going to have stuff ready to transplant in August, so we need a couple, like, you know, shovels. Somehow I broke a hand shovel this year that's metal. I'm not really sure how I did it, but I did it. So I need to go back through and make sure I have enough shovels. One of the big things I know I need to do, you might need to do, is the pruners. Anyone else? We haven't cleaned them ever and now they're sticking. Yeah, me too. So make sure that you clean stuff and get it ready so that's a little bit easier to use this year. And this next part, because if you notice, many of these activities you don't need to be outside for. And this next part, you definitely do not need to be outside. So feel free to do this in the middle of the high heat and high sun of the day from the comfort of your air-conditioned house. And that is to take inventory of what do you eat, or what did you eat? For those of you who grew stuff, did you eat all of it? Did you can a lot of it? What worked? What didn't work? And for those who are starting a new garden, taking the time to go through and really think about what do you eat and then how does that connect with what you're gonna grow. Because there are too many of us who get excited about interesting things and have zero plan on how to use them. Is oftentimes we're very worried in the beginning about being able to grow anything, but then the challenge comes is we forget to ask the question, but what if it works? And this was a challenge for me this year. I put in a lot of peppers, and then all of a sudden I have way too many peppers. It's a good problem. I canned a lot. But now I need to take stock of the fact that I really don't need as many peppers this coming year as I planted this last year. And I'll need to take that into account in the following year. But that's one of the things you should really be taking the time to do, is reflecting on what kind of groceries did you buy from the store. And there's two ways you really should consider thinking about it. What did you spend the most money on, and what did you get the largest quantity of? Because both of these will save you a lot of money. Kind of the big three when it comes to saving a lot of money in general, maybe for you, but maybe not. We're gonna talk about lettuces, we're gonna talk about berries, and we're gonna talk about herbs. These things have some of the best return of investment for like per ounce. But if you don't eat a lot of these things, it's not a good use of your money to just eat up your bed space just because it could save you. If you're gonna have 300 pounds of basil, like what are you doing with it? Well, I guess at that point you start a company and you sell it. But honestly, like it could save you a lot of money, but if you don't eat a lot of it in general, it's not really good value. Now, in general, when we look at people's diets, in general, this might be you, may not, but things to be inspired by that get through a lot of pounds can save you a lot of money. We're thinking things like tomatoes, onions, like honestly, people eat a lot of onions, probably more than they think about it, and then peppers. Followed up by using things like sweet potatoes and pumpkins to really like just oomph. So consider, what do you eat? What do you buy a lot of? Or what do you spend a lot of money on? Those should be the things you're prioritizing in your garden. Now, if you already have been growing, consider what inventory do you have left over? Because you may be like me, similar with the fact that like I had a great year of peppers, but I just don't need to grow that many peppers next year because I canned so much. I don't need any excess next year. I want some fresh, but I don't need to put away a bunch of it. And that might be similar for you. What have you canned a lot of? What do you have in your freezers that you just don't need maybe as much this coming year? And maybe you prioritize a different crop or try something new. Now the thing is that we do want to think about starting to order all of our seeds. Kind of two reasons. One, most of the seed companies follow the northerner, so as we hit summer, they're starting to lose a lot of their stock and they won't replenish until like we're about 50 to 60% of the way through our season. So we want to go grab seeds now. The other thing is that if you're ordering seeds online, it can often take about 2 weeks for them to show up. So if you see this video in June or you see it in July, I mean, by the time the seeds are arriving, it's almost time to start, especially our warm weather crops. So you want to prioritize getting your seed inventory in a good place, whether you already have seeds or you need to order seeds. You want to get those seeds ordered as soon as possible. But I don't know what varieties. I know I need some tomatoes. I know I want some peppers, but which type? Well, go ahead and check out this video right here. I go over all the vegetable varieties that worked for me this last season. And if you want to continue to keep yourself on track, go ahead and use the Wild Floridian Garden Planner that has helped hundreds and hundreds of Floridians create the Florida garden of their dreams, including their vegetable garden. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.